Health Today is brought to you by
It is essential that each of us make healthy lifestyle choices to reduce our cancer risk. These lifestyle changes include consuming healthy foods and drinks, quitting smoking, reducing alcohol consumption, increasing our physical activity, and attaining adequate rest and relaxation. Dietary changes of specific interest include limiting the intake of red meat and avoiding processed meats. This is Nurse Lisa, and remember, the nurse knows.
In this edition of Health Today, athletics is a lot of fun. Getting hurt is not. There's nothing like the thrill of watching athletics, and this is a term we'll get to cheer on our boys and girls on the track in competition. Whether it's running, jumping, hurdling, or field events, the finesse and skills are admirable. Unfortunately, it all comes with a risk: injury. Specialist in physical medicine, rehabilitation, and sports medicine, Dr. Shane Drakes, says injuries are common for all athletes and will vary according to the discipline. Let's start with the sprinters and hurdlers. These powerhouses usually suffer injuries in the lower limbs, which occur suddenly. Dr. Drake says these are acute injuries and involve strained muscles or tendons, most commonly the hamstring.
The hamstrings, they flex the knee, they also extend the hip. And in some people, where you have abnormal strength, you're not as strong as you should be, or you're not as flexible as you can be, your hamstrings can really come under serious strain from that, and then that can result in injury. Mm-hmm. So the hamstring injuries can range from just a strain, which is just like a grade 1, which we would say is just you probably just tore a few fibers in the muscle, to a grade 2 where there's you tore more of it, mm-hmm. and then a grade 3 where you could have completely torn the muscle. Mm-hmm. And some people, they also tear the tendon from the attachment, which is, as it sounds, quite painful.
For hurdlers, they suffer injuries similar to sprinters, but are often affected by strains to the groin. In the case of long-distance runners, they tend to get injuries from overuse.
Things like shin splints that people might have heard about before is very common, and this can result from overuse. Definitely, that's a major factor. So if you increase your training, usually if you have a sudden increase in your training in terms of how many meters or how many miles you're running in a week from one week to the next, you can definitely get that. If your footwear is not good, the kind of surface you run on, so if you run on the road a lot, that can definitely place more stress on that area. So shin splints, the person would normally have pain, as it sounds, along the shin, mm-hmm. and this can range from just inflammation in the muscle and the tendon on the surface of the bone. But if it persists for a long time and is not treated appropriately, it can actually progress to a stress fracture. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you really wouldn't want to play around with, because obviously if you have a fracture, you're going to be out from the sport for a longer period of time, and it may require surgery.
Athletes who favor field events, javelin, shot put, discus, the long jump, and the high jump must also be mindful of safeguarding themselves from injuries. According to Dr. Drakes, these athletes suffer most from shoulder injuries.
So definitely the rotator cuff, which is a group of 4 muscles that help to provide stability in the shoulder and also helps with rotation of the arm. In javelin throwers, another one that they can get is at the elbow. So if they're using improper technique, they can also increase the force that they put across the elbow as well as the shoulder, mm-hmm. in order to get more distance on the javelin, and that can also damage one of the ligaments on the inside of the shoulder. On the inside of the elbow. and that if that progresses, definitely you may require surgery for that. In the jumpers, a lot of people get what's called a jumper's knee, which is a overuse injury, and this is where your patellar tendon, the tendon that joins your kneecap to your shin bone, that's under stress from those repeated jumps. Your Achilles tendon, which is in the back of the leg, down by the heel, attaches down to the heel, that's also under a lot of stress from repeated jumping. So those would be two areas that jumpers definitely can have problems with from overuse. Some people can also get things like ankle sprains, either if you take off badly, or if you land badly. And then the high jumpers, most people now, the way you go over the bar is what you call the flop. So with the flop, you take off and then you arch your back to go over the bar. So that repeated arching of the back, or what we call hyperextension of the spine, in children or adolescents who, your bones are still growing, you're not reached skeletal maturity yet, that can lead to some issues in the spine as well.
While injuries are common, they can be avoided. Dr. Drake advises that all athletes need to start with proper screening.
We still have to start with something which is not very common in Barbados or even in this region, which is the pre-participation physical exam. And that's important because you get to look at whether this person has had an injury before. If you've had a hamstring injury, definitely, if you don't do proper rehabilitation on that, you're definitely be at risk for a second one. So finding out who's had an injury before and what kind of rehabilitative work was done for that is important. The pre-participation physical exam, first and foremost, is trying to make sure you can participate in sports safely. So you can see if anybody has a heart condition that needs to be treated or any other kind of condition. Other things are, you can look at, okay, is this person strong enough or flexible enough? And if you find out that that's not the case, you can put measures into play in their training program to actually correct those things.
In addition, he urges athletes to take time for rest and recovery to avoid burnout, which he warns could lead to premature exit from the sport.
You have to balance training with recovery. Parents need to be involved in this as well and know, how much their children are training, how much time they're spending. One good strategy might be to restrict any extracurricular activities to probably a maximum of 5 days a week. On average, there may be a week or two where you have, you train during the week and you have a meet on Saturday and Sunday, but you shouldn't let that be the norm.
More importantly, Dr. Drake cautions athletes not to ignore or hide any injury,
so that they can be assessed and see, if they need to have any time off, if they need to have any kind of treatment, and make sure that they get the most appropriate treatment as early as possible. I think if you can follow those guidelines, then the risk of injury from track and field will be greatly reduced.
That's Health Today for this week. Join us again next time. Until then, stay active, stay safe. I'm Sandy Dean.